118 teams to go in my road to predict all 131 teams this college football offseason. And we're on to the Georgia Bulldogs, the reigning national champions from the 2021-2022 college football season. And this is the Georgia team that was really good last year. In fact, in my opinion, in my time of watching football, one of the more entertaining things to do, and I'll explain more about why here in a little bit, but Georgia losing so much talent, losing a lot of production from last year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So will Georgia continue to push for a spot in the college football playoff, possibly on their way to another national championship? Or will this team miss the playoff and maybe take a slight step back in 2022? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome to my channel. And hey, I'm doing all 131 teams this college football offseason, which means I'm predicting your favorite team. So what are you doing? Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you know when your favorite team gets uploaded. This goes out to Georgia fans in this video, but to all my other videos in general, you guys are going to know a lot more about your teams than me. So if you feel like I missed something, you want to add something on, anything like that, leave it in the comment section down below, and I'd be happy to read through them. Talking about Georgia in 2022, they're my second-ranked team in the SEC, which means you guys know who's number one by now, and you guys will end up seeing that video later today. But for the Georgia Bulldogs coming into 2022, they were the national champions last year, of course, 8-1, including the game in the SEC championship game. I include championship games in my conference records. That's just how I roll. They ended up losing that game to Alabama in the conference championship game, but they avenged their loss in SEC championships, in the 2018 national championship, and the 2022 national championship, where they did beat the Alabama Crimson Tide en route to their second national championship in the last 40 years. For the Georgia Bulldogs, this team was led by their defense last year. What a defense it was. One of the best in college football history. Around 250 yards per game allowed, along with under 10 points per game allowed. That's nuts, ridiculous. Really good numbers from that Georgia defense. And the offense held up its end of the bargain as well. 442 yards a game, along with around 39 points per game. So good things happened in Georgia last year, in Athens last year. Of course, they won the national championship. Looking at some of the talent that is leaving this team, we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. But I also have to point out that Dan Lanning, the defensive coordinator, went to go take the job at Oregon after Mario Cristobal moved to Miami. They're still, of course, coached by head coach Kirby Smart, but they're losing JT Daniels. JT Daniels just never got it figured out in a Georgia uniform. 722 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions when he played last year. But again, never stayed healthy, never really got it figured out in the Georgia uniform. He's now going to be playing for the West Virginia Mountaineers. Couple running backs to the NFL, Zamir White and James Cook, losing around 1,600 yards and 18 total touchdowns on the ground between those two running backs. Couple very talented guys leaving that wide receiver room. George Pickens and Jermaine Burton are both gone. Burton was the second leading receiver on this team last year. Also got guys like John Fitzpatrick leaving that tight end room. But it's the defensive side of the ball where this team loses so much talent. Walker, Davis, Wyatt, Dean, Walker, Tyndall, Sign, Kendrick, Brinney, and so many more guys that I just couldn't put on this list. Of course, Travon Walker was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this Georgia team just lost so much talent off the defensive side of the ball. Ridiculous amounts of defensive talent. But what do they have coming back? Well, they have presumably their starting quarterback coming back next year. That's Stetson Bennett. And man, if your opinion of Stetson Bennett is still he's not a very good quarterback, you got to start changing your opinion, because Stetson Bennett is a very solid quarterback to have running the show back there. 2,862 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He holds up his end of the deal. He plays smart football, doesn't make a whole lot of costly mistakes. All around just a very smart football player. Running backs, Kenny McIntosh, Kendall Milton figured to be the duo back there. Wide receiver room still has a lot of talent. Kyrus Jackson, Dominic Blaylock, Adonai Jackson. Tight ends, Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, and possibly Arik Gilbert. I haven't really heard a whole lot on if Arik Gilbert is going to play this year. Of course, last year had stuff with academic issues, so didn't get on the football field. So hopefully he can get on the football field this year. But if not, I include him on this list because everywhere I've seen he's on the roster. So we'll definitely see what happens with Arik Gilbert there. Defensive side of the ball, still a lot of good talent. You got Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, two of the better pass rushers in the nation coming back for this Georgia team. Excuse me, Nolan Smith. More of a linebacker defensive line combo there, but did provide 3.5 sacks to this team last year. And Jalen Carter figures to be a first-round NFL draft pick. He had 3 sacks last year as well. Couple guys coming back at the linebacker position, especially Robert Beal, who had 6.5 sacks last year. Dumas Johnson, 21 tackles, 2 sacks, a pick. And then in their defensive backs, Keely Ringo, who figures to be a first-round NFL draft pick, and a couple Smiths, Chris Smith and Tyke Smith. Of course, Tyke Smith, the former prospect, the former talent out of West Virginia. Chris Smith had 3 interceptions for this team last year, including the game-winning pick 6 against Clemson that really kicked off this amazing Georgia defensive season. Let's go ahead and take a look now at the Georgia schedule. Immediately in non-conference play, there's a game that catches your eye, and that's the game against Oregon. That's the big green circle, big green O. But Oregon, look, that's a very, very interesting storyline because Dan Lanning left to go take the head coaching job at Oregon. Bo Nix, also a former Auburn quarterback, very familiar with playing Georgia. He transferred over to Oregon. So there's a lot of storylines writing themselves with that Georgia-Oregon game in a neutral site in Atlanta. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch. As far as other non-conference games, you got the game against Samford, Kent State, and Georgia Tech at the end of the year. You got another neutral site game, though, in conference play. That's the game in Jacksonville against Florida. Of course, they have that game in Jacksonville every year. Should be a pretty interesting one to watch, especially since Florida is bringing in a potential Heisman quarterback candidate in, Anthony Richardson. Home games for this Georgia Bulldog team in SEC play: Auburn, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee. And road games against South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State, and Kentucky. So talking about the schedule a little bit, again, the game that pops out to you is the game against Oregon. And what I think is going to happen in this Oregon, well, again, I'll explain a little later, but this Oregon-Georgia game should be a whole lot of fun, in my opinion. Again, I have a feeling that Georgia-Oregon game is going to be playing a lot of mind games. There's going to be a lot of the game within the game kind of thing, right? Dan Lanning and Bo Nix know this Georgia team well, so does that give them an advantage, or is Kirby Smart and Georgia going to mix things up? Are they going to play a little different? Or they're going to play more aggressive? Things like that. There's going to be a lot of mind games going on there with that game there. I cannot wait to watch that one in week 1. There are a lot of games week 1 that are just going to be phenomenal games to watch. Then, of course, your non-conference games probably should win the rest of those. Conference play on the road worries me for this Georgia team because on the road against South Carolina, that's an interesting early little road test for this Georgia team. And it's an interesting early test for South Carolina, period. But it all depends on whether or not Spencer Rattler is going to have a fast start or it's going to have a slow start like he has pretty much all the seasons that he's had under his belt there at Oklahoma. Had such a slow start last year. They replaced him with Caleb Williams, and he was fantastic, was Caleb Williams. So, Spencer Rattler, now a member of the South Carolina Gamecocks, he's going to get an interesting early test here with Georgia, but they're also going to be coming off the game against Arkansas, so we'll see what happens there. And then the road game against Missouri, that doesn't worry me that much. But the road games against Mississippi State and Kentucky do. Those are 2 very, very hard back-to-back road games and 2 teams that figure to be pretty good this year. Again, I've already talked about Mississippi State. I don't think their record is going to suggest how good that team is on the football field. But this is the Mississippi State team that is returning a lot of talent, including quarterback Will Rogers, and Kentucky's also returning their quarterback as well in Will Levis. Both those teams have some things to figure out, yes, but those are going to be 2 games that Georgia's got to watch out for. Home slate, pretty favorable. You got Auburn at home, Tennessee at home, Vanderbilt at home, all games that Georgia should be able to win. I don't do game-by-game predictions. I do a more percentage-based outlook. So if the game's in red, you're not going to win the game. If the game is in orange, still probably not going to win, but hey, it's college football. You could upset the team on the other side of the ball. Yellow are your 50-50 or high upset potential games. Yellow-green are games They should probably win. But again, college football can work its magic, and games in green are games that you're probably going to end up winning. So 4 games in green: Samford, Kent State, Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech. Don't see any way Georgia loses those. Some games in yellow-green that I think Georgia's pretty comfortable with winning. I think on the road against Missouri should be a pretty comfortable win. Same thing with the game against Auburn and the game against Florida as well. Tennessee could prove to be a little bit of a closer game, but I still think Georgia's going to end up getting the win there. That's why the game is in yellow-green. And then when you look at games like Oregon and Mississippi State and Kentucky, that's where the schedule gets interesting for Georgia. That Oregon game, again, I've already talked about why it's interesting. You got Dan Lanning. You got Bo Nix. You got a lot of other playmakers there, or Dan Lanning being the coach, but Bo Nix and a lot of playmakers coming back for that Oregon team. They don't figure to be SEC favorites or anything, or Pac-12 favorites, or anything crazy like that. Again, that's probably going to go to Utah or USC, but Oregon's still up there, right? Oregon is still one of the better teams in the Pac-12, and there's going to be a lot of mind games to play in that one. Georgia's got to watch out in Atlanta. But then these 2 road games are what worry me the most about this Georgia schedule. On the road against Mississippi State in Starkville, it's a hard place to play when the cowbells are going, when the fans are loud. Georgia could be looking ahead to that game against Kentucky. That could prove to be a huge game in the road to clinching the SEC East. Or Georgia could come out sluggish, maybe beat Mississippi State, and then possibly not take Kentucky too seriously, and they could lose that game there as well. I honestly really could see Georgia losing any one of those 2 games there. And sometimes, guys, you got to have fun with some things, right? You got to try to predict the unpredictable. And I think that's what might happen with Georgia this year. Is I see most people predicting Georgia to go 12-0 this year. I am different. I think Georgia's going to go 11-1 in 2022 this year. Can this team go 12-0? Yes, absolutely. There's a very, very high probability that this Georgia team goes 12-0 in 2022. Very high probability with how favorable their schedule in the SEC is. I see the floor for this team being absolutely no lower than 10-2. But I see this team going 11-1. I see college football working its magic, and one of those 2 teams at the end of the schedule pulling off an upset against these Georgia Bulldogs. This team, in my opinion, is definitely not as talented on the defensive side of the ball. So their offense is going to have to step it up, maybe do a little more work than they would have had to do last year. And I don't think that's going to be a problem. I just think college football is going to end up working its magic, guys, and Georgia's going to get upset somewhere down the line. So that's my 2022 prediction for the Georgia Bulldogs. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, do all that. And hey, remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll be back with my last video of the SEC and then standing predictions. See all you guys in the next one. Goodbye.